This pamphlet had a good effect. Governor Thomas was so pleased with the construction of this new stove, as described in it, that he offered to give me a patent for the sole vending for the term of 10 years. For a term of years, pardon me, but I declined it from a principle which has ever weighed with me on such occasions, viz., that as we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, we should be glad of an opportunity to serve others by any invention of ours, and this we should do freely and generously. That is very similar to communism. Now, Ben invented a few nice little gadgets, but for someone to sit around in a laboratory 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, year after year after year, doing nothing but trying to invent new things, you have to have a patent system to get someone like Thomas Alva Edison. An ironmonger in London, however, assuming a good deal of my pamphlet and working it up into his own, plagiarizing Ben, and making some small changes in the machine, which rather hurt its operation, so the guy didn't even understand the damn thing, got a patent for it there, and made, as I was told, a little fortune by it. And this is not the only instance of patents taken out of my invention by others, though not always with the same success, which I never contested as having no desire of profiting by patents myself, and hating disputes. The use of these fireplaces in very many houses, both here in Pennsylvania and the neighboring states, has been and is a great saving of wood to the inhabitants. Wood, it takes labor to gather wood. To gather it and cut it takes labor. So that's the end of chapter 8. We're on to chapter 9 now. It talks about how Philadelphia has these beautiful regular streets. They're straight, they cross each other at right angles, and quote, "The disgrace of suffering those streets to remain long unpaved, and in wet weather the wheels of heavy carriages plowed them into a quagmire, so that it was difficult to cross them, and in dry weather the dust was offensive." That's the condition of the roads. Even though there's these nice big wide thoroughfares, but they're dusty when it's dry, they're a quagmire when it's wet. Quote, "I had lived near them, and in dry weather the dust was offensive." So he talks about he lived near a place called Jersey Market, and he saw the pain of the inhabitants, quote, "wading in mud while purchasing their provisions." So eventually they got a strip paved down the middle of that market, and that by and by got the project of paving the whole square. Then Franklin goes along and sees that it's quite a nuisance because wagon wheels bring mud and stuff in, and there's no one there to clean it, no dusting or whatever, no daily cleanup. So then he petitions to have a sweeper be kept, and gets all this sort of things done, and even gets lighting put in, which we'll see in a bit. Now he'd gotten the square paved, and then he wrote articles pointing out all these benefits to the paving of the square. And people read these articles and stuff, and then after he's written a couple articles and pamphlets and talked about it with friends and stuff and disseminated it through the Junto, mind you, the Junto Club, after that, then he, quote, "After some time I drew a bill for paving the city and brought it into the Assembly. It was just before I went to England in 1757, and did not pass until I was gone. And then an alteration in the mode of assessment, which I thought not for the better, but with an additional provision for lighting as well as paving the streets, which was a great improvement." So the way that they did the paving he didn't think was as good as the thing he had planned, but they added a provision to actually put lighting in as well. It talks about Mr. John Clifton, who's probably the original idea of putting out public lights for the public, because this is a gentleman who put out a light on the front of his house and kept it on at all hours. And Franklin decided this should be for the whole city, so people give Franklin the credit, and Franklin here gives Mr. John Clifton credit. John Clifton put this light out in front of his house, and I got the idea it should be everywhere in the city, and everyone gave me the idea for public illumination. Well, he's being a little modest. He says, quote, "I have only some merit to claim respecting the form of our lamps, Now, public lighting had been a thing in London before, so it wasn't a revolution of the world just in that city. But then, quote, "I have only some merit to claim respecting the form of our lamps, as differing from the globe lamps we were first supplied with from London." Everyone's seen those globes of the 1800s. "They were found inconvenient in these respects. They admitted no air below. The smoke therefore did not readily go out above, but circulated in the globe, lodged on its inside, and soon obstructed the light that they were intended to afford." Not a very efficient globe. Franklin talks about how they have to be cleaned constantly, and then guess what? These big glass bulbs being cleaned break easily. Just one little teeny thing and they're totally useless after that. And if they don't get cleaned every once in a while, quote, then after the lamps have been lit a few hours, the streets of London are very poorly illuminated. They're very labor intensive, have to be cleaned daily just because of this poor design. But to solve this situation with the lamps, Franklin, quote, "therefore suggested the composing the lamps of 4 flat panes of glass with a long funnel above to draw up the smoke, and crevices admitting the air below to facilitate the ascent of the smoke." So he can only come to that conclusion by knowing something about candles and convection and stuff. "By this means they were kept clean, and did not grow dark in a few hours, as the London lamps do, but continued bright till morning. And an accidental stroke would generally break but a single pane, easily repaired." So lowers the cost of labor because people don't have to clean it as much. Lowers the cost of the lamps themselves because they don't have to be replaced as often. And increases their usefulness because they actually provide full illumination now. Now he talks about in London he sees an old woman sweeping and he asks who pays her, and she says nobody. I'm a poor old pensioner and I just sweep the streets in front of people's houses and hope that they'll contribute something to me. Quote, "I then judged that if that feeble woman could sweep such a street in 3 hours," because he said, "I'll give you so and so much if you sweep this whole thing here," then a strong, active man might have done it in half the time. So now his brain starts working. What can we do to get the streets swept every day? "My proposal communicated to the doctor was as follows," quote, "for the more effectual cleaning and keeping clean of the streets of London and Westminster, it is proposed that the several watchmen be contracted to have the dust swept up in dry season and the mud raked up at other times." The watchmen, so he's going to have the cops, policemen who are out on a beat, clean. I don't know how popular it was, but, quote, "that in the dry summer months the dust be all swept up into heaps at proper distances, before the shops and windows of the houses are usually opened, and then carry it all away. That the mud, when raked up, be not left in heaps to be spread abroad again by the wheels of carriages and trampling of horses, but that the scavengers be provided with bodies of carts." And he details the design of which they put the mud on this lattice of stuff that would drain the water out. That would be easier, because right now, as he's proposing this legislation, the government of London has a thing where they scrape the muck into carts, wagon carts, and the muck just falls out of the sides. So they've got these great government wagon cart loads of muck sloshing through the city to go be unloaded. They probably lose half or more of their load by the time they get there, and they're a hazard to people on the way. Stuff falling out of them, you don't want to be near them as stuff splashes out or whatever, comes out the sides or whatever. So it's a great nuisance. And he has all kinds of schemes for the government to fix all kinds of stuff. Now he talks about how he thinks the dust should be swept up and all this gathered in the morning before the shops are opened, because he was walking early one morning and he quote, "observed there was not one shop open around 7 o'clock, though it had been daylight and the sun up above 3 hours. Well, kind of, crack of dawn comes at 5 a.m. in the summer, I guess. So even though daylight is here, people choose to still sleep. How could this happen? It used to be daylight was valuable." Quote, the inhabitants of London choosing voluntarily